Coming up next on the PEG podcast.
A lot of markets, people are concerned about their safety and their well-being, right? And it's always a challenge in local news. People want to know and they want to feel safe in the communities where they live, where they work, where they shop. And here in St. Louis, that is a topic that's been top of mind for many years.
Are murder statistics actually going down?
The numbers are actually going.
We just want to make a difference. Pay Podcast.
I'm Karen Spann, and I own PEG Staffing and Recruiting, and we're in business to make a difference in people's lives. And I'd like to welcome Chris Nagus, I'm the news director of Channel 4.
Karen, thank you so much.
Our
Good to be here.
podcast today. And we're going to talk today about what you guys do at Channel 4 to make a difference in your employees' lives, in the lives of your clients, and in the lives of the community in St. Louis.
Yeah, happy to help with that.
So with that, why don't you tell me about you guys?
Yeah, well,
and what you do at Channel 4.
We are a CBS affiliate here in St. Louis. We serve a metropolitan area of nearly 3 million people. And it can be a chaotic news cycle at times. There's a lot that goes on in a market like St. Louis. So we are always chasing the story of the day, and we're working really hard to try to find news that is relevant in the lives of our viewers. You talk about your clients and your customers. Our viewers are our customers, and we want to make sure that we aren't wasting their time and that we're giving them stories that matter to them and that are important. And we do a lot of market research, and we talk to our viewers and we find out what's important. And there is some variation market to market. But what I'm finding these days is that our customers and the community that we serve, they're really concerned about their pocketbooks. They're really concerned about their money. They're concerned about affordability. And so we try to look for stories that tap into that.
So what matters most to a St. Louisan right now, aside from the pocketbook?
Yeah, besides pocketbook, I think that a lot of markets, people are concerned about their safety and their well-being, right? And it's always a challenge in local news because we hear from viewers who say, news can be all bad or it's all negative. And I turn it on and I see the crime of the day or what's happening in some neighborhood that maybe feels disconnected from their life. And they don't necessarily want to hear about something bad happening in their community. And I always tell our reporters and our crews, it's important to put context behind our reporting. We try to go in depth with those numbers. We try to let people know, are these crime numbers part of a bigger trend? But safety always rises to the top. People want to know and they want to feel safe in the communities where they live, where they work, where they shop. And here in St. Louis, that is a topic that's been top of mind for many years. I mean, I was born in this market. I grew up in this market. I've lived in other metropolitan areas. But coming back to St. Louis, that feels like an issue that continues to resonate here.
It does. And one of the questions I have, I know that in some cities they're talking about the murder rates getting lower, yada, yada, yada. But I'm not sure that they're not just reporting a fact that is in a bubble. Is St. Louis, are murder statistics actually going down?
The numbers are actually going down, and there has been some improvement on violent crime in the St. Louis metropolitan area. One of the challenges that St. Louis has as a region is the city limits are actually very, very small. It's 65 or 66 square miles. And so if you look at that compared to a Kansas City, for example, the Kansas City limits are enormous. They would include areas like Florissant, Chesterfield. And so they would have a wider geography and the population is more spread out, which helps to spread some of those numbers out. And that's a story that's often overlooked or not told in a place like St. Louis. A lot of the crime that occurs in this metro area is concentrated. It is in specific neighborhoods. And we've seen that for years. The numbers go up, the numbers come down. But I do think it's important to provide context when we talk about that on the local news and where it's happening. And more importantly, why? Why is it happening? But there are a lot of dynamics at play. But in St. Louis, I will say this, I've been a reporter in this market. I worked on the streets of the city for 13 years. And I feel safe living here. I always tell people that, sometimes I get that St. Louis has a bad reputation about crime. We always make those top 10 lists. We always make those lists that we really aren't proud of as a metro. But I tell people, you've got to put it in context and you've got to understand what those numbers really mean.
So let's talk about the culture within Channel 4. Uh, how do you guys make a difference in the lives of the people? What's it like inside the actual business?
Yeah, so inside the newsroom, we have an interesting business because we don't close. We are 365, 24 hours, 7 days a week, including holidays. So to staff the operational needs of a business like that, I've got people working at all hours of the day. I don't get to, turn off the open sign and turn on the close sign at 5 o'clock on a Friday. And so culture is critically important. And I have to make sure that my reporters, my producers, my directors, my assignment editors, my managers, that all of them feel supported. Most people enter a field like television news or journalism because they're passionate about it. It is, for a lot of people, they'll tell you it's a calling. They love to serve, and it really is a community service-oriented job. You're storytellers. You're telling the stories of people in this community. And the demands going in, right? You understand it. But then when you actually do it and you have to live that, burnout can be a real thing. So I try to put myself in the position of my employees as much as possible. I came up the ranks into a news director management position from the very bottom. I mean, I started as a reporter in Des Moines, Iowa. I worked at Bureau. I know what it's like to cover a rural area. I know what it's like to work my way up into that Des Moines newsroom, then eventually Kansas City, eventually St. Louis. Then I got onto the investigative unit here. So I've done a variety of jobs in the field. So I feel like I have a really good understanding of what they do day to day. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've done every single job in my newsroom. I've never been a director. I've never directed a show. And so I always want to make sure I'm having conversation with folks so I understand where they're coming from. And you know this, you've been doing your job for a long time. Think about the evolution over the last 25 years. The job I started doing 25 years ago is very different from the job today. The technology has changed. The needs of the business have changed. When I started, we barely had a website, right? And now we think about the digital needs and where people are getting their news. Karen, I've got my phone turned off, but this is probably where you get a lot of your news. Mm-hmm. This is the new television set right here,
it really
right?
is.
And programming for that and thinking about what that looks like requires a lot of conversation. So you started this with, what's the culture like? What is it like internally? I think we've got, and I say this, and you could talk to any of my employees, I do feel like we have a family-like culture in the newsroom because we do work crazy hours. We work these overnight shifts. We work these early morning shifts. We work on holidays together. In fact, one of my employees who's been at the station for, she's probably been there 25 years at this point, just sent me something yesterday and said, hey, is it cool if I, order this for Thanksgiving? This is the Thanksgiving menu for the newsroom. I want to make sure the employees who have to work are fed. It's those little things that go a long way. But also touching base with employees and letting them know when they're doing something right, not just when something is wrong. I know I always appreciated that feedback coming up the ranks. And so I hope to return that to the employees that work for me.
I've been there and I've seen how much fun you guys have.
It is fun. It's a blast.
And what nice people work there. And it makes you feel just really great when you're there and how welcoming you all are when you go there. I've been there.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I always tell people, and I know that sometimes we get lumped in and people talk about the media and, things can easily go into politics or this or that. And people use the word the media as something that they almost assign blame to. But what I always tell people here in St. Louis, we are stakeholders in this community. I have 3 boys. I told you I've got triplets that are 14 going on 15 next month. They go to high school in this community, right? They're part of this. I shop at Schnucks and Deerbergs and the local Aldi. I go to the local restaurants. I'm a stakeholder here, just like every single one of my employees in local news. We do not parachute in for the big stories. We are here. We live here. And, when I look at the 150 or so employees that, make up KMOV, all of them live in different parts of this metro area. They all have different friends and relationships and families. And we all understand that. The stakes are high. So we want to make sure that we're accurate. We want to make sure that we're right. But it is a fun place to work. And I'm not going to, sugarcoat everything. There are days where at the end of it, you walk out and go, man, that was a rough day. There was, a lot to handle in the news cycle or in the newsroom. But at the end of the day, I feel I've got a really grounded group of people that I get to work with. And that is a big deal to me.
That does bring up a question. You all get some really tough stuff that you have to handle.
We do.
How do you get your crew through that?
I tell my crews, all of us, whether you work as a producer behind the scenes or a reporter anchor on the front lines and the public sees you and knows who you are, I always say be a human being first and a journalist second, right? We are all journalists and storytellers. That's what our job is. But be a human. You have to lead with empathy. We are often seeing people on the toughest day of their life, and it's not a day that person planned for. And I have to remember that. And I always say, please, if somebody tells you no, it's no, right? If they don't want to be part of a story that day, it doesn't mean they won't want to be part of a story at some point down the line. But we face some pretty tough stuff. And, I'm a dad, I'm a parent, and there are certain stories that just get to me. I mean, like I have sat in my office before and just felt the weight of some of the things that we've had to cover. And God forbid, I think about it. If the shoe was on the other foot and I was on the other end receiving a call that I didn't want to receive, how would I react? And I think that we have to keep that top of mind. I don't want to have a newsroom that has a reputation for being known, chasing a story at any cost. That's not who we are. That's not who we are. We are still going to do the stories that matter. We're going to do the stories that are relevant. But sometimes those stories take time to develop and unfold. And we've just got to keep that in mind as we approach what we do every day.
You also have to edit out the parts that we don't see.
There's some tough stuff, right? And so that's an editorial decision. And at the end of the day, when we decide what are we going to show on the air and what are we not, sometimes I feel, we have these conversations and we have these really healthy debates and discussions that the viewers don't see. And we have to determine, is there value to showing something? Does it contribute to the ongoing dialogue in the community to fix something? Is there a problem? Is there a solution we're seeking? How far do we go in showing something? And you're right, we do have to make that call. And I also have to remember that I, have a news program that is on at 6 a.m. as our children getting ready for school with their parents, at 5 p.m. as kids are getting back from school. We're on during a lot of different day parts where I have to be sensitive to some degree, well, really not some degree, a big degree of what people are seeing. And it doesn't mean that I'm sugarcoating the news or that I'm leaving out, important information that people need to know about. But when something's right on that line, but we feel it adds value, I do ask my anchors and reporters to say, you're about to see a story that may be tough for some of you to watch. We want to give you a heads up. We want to give you a warning that the video you're about to see might not be appropriate for all viewers. So I try to make sure that disclaimer is there if it is something that's really, really tough to watch.
I think that's a really important thing for news shows to do.
And I think about too, just, we're living this right now, this week, watching this Louisville plane crash, right? The video is on over and over and over again. And I have to keep in mind, that was 3 crew members, right? Plus the people on the ground. And as we learn more details about that, it's horrific. I feel like being 4 hours away, sometimes people feel a little bit removed from a situation like that. But that is the reality that families are facing this week. And I do think about, I think there's a value in showing it because we can get to, we can get to the part where we find out what happened, what went wrong, because the video does tell a story. The left engine came off the plane. Why did that occur, right? There's all of these things that the video shows that gets us to an answer. But then we have to at some point say, do we continue to show this? Everyone has already seen it. What value does it continue to add?
I also think, and disagree with me if you do disagree, that people are anesthetized because of our phones and social media, to all these mass shootings, to watching just horrible images all the time.
Right.
And it's almost like it's not real anymore.
I do feel that there is a disconnect. And again, people see it on their phone and it's happening somewhere else. It's not happening in their backyard. When it happens here in St. Louis, I do think that does sound the alarm bell. Yeah, it's the tornado on May 16th. Oh my gosh, this is now my backyard. People that I know are impacted, and that rises to a different level. But you're right. I mean, I remember very vividly, and I can't remember what year it was, but I certainly remember the Columbine High School shooting, right? And that was really a first. And we were just all in shock. For those that are old enough to remember when that occurred, and watching the network news break in and seeing what was happening in Littleton, Colorado, was so far beyond comprehension for most people that this could happen inside a high school that looks just like the high school your kids might attend, whether it's Boise, Idaho, or Billings, Montana, or here in St. Louis. And in the years that followed, we saw more and more of that. And unfortunately, we still see that. And I feel like there is a little bit of a desensitization. Is that the right word, that I'm looking for there, where we hear these things and the news cycle just moves on so quickly, so fast. And we live in a fast-paced world. People are always looking for what's the next thing. I do think attention spans are shorter because of it. Think about what you consume on social media. After 40 seconds, if you're not captivated, you're swiping to the next thing and moving on. And I feel in a lot of ways that is how society is now. And that's a tough reality. But I think that might be what contributes to what you're talking about. So I do agree with you on that.
And one of the things that I love on the news is when you have something positive.
Yeah, for sure.
It's almost like a breath of fresh air hits me when you have a nice story on the news, which is kind of sad that when there's a positive thing happens in our community, that it makes something comes over on my body that I go, oh my gosh, something nice is being reported.
Right. And I think it's really important that we do remind our viewers of the good things that are happening in St. Louis. As part of my job as the news director, and I take this very seriously, I feel like part of the role is to be the celebrant of the community and the good things that happen here, because it's really easy to get, mired down in all of the bad. And think about a newscast, the linear broadcast. And when I say linear, I'm talking about what you see over the air on Channel 4. 30 minutes long. You've got sports, you've got weather, you've got commercial breaks. And when you boil all of it down, how much news is really there? And I want to make sure that we are saving time for those moments of levity in our community and that you are seeing the good. And I'll tell you, Karen, I worked for a company, Scripps Broadcasting, before my role here at Channel 4, and I worked on the corporate side. And one of my jobs was to go around the country and work at television stations to roll out their brands. And some of our markets, the brand was actually positivity. Our station in Nashville, Tennessee, had a positivity brand behind it. And what I would tell reporters and anchors and producers, it doesn't mean that all of the news is positive, but can we find a positive angle even in the bad? And one that, hits me over the head. I remember there was flooding in Tennessee, and a reporter who actually used to work at KSDK at our competitor is now at that station in Nashville. And I remember he did a story looking for the angels, looking for the helpers, the people that came to the rescue. So you've got this flood that destroyed lots of people's homes, but his focus that day was, I'm going to find the helpers and the good in the bad. So I do think that's an approach that we can take in local news. Mm-hmm. Is it always there? Are you always able to find it top of mind in the middle of a breaking news situation? Not necessarily, but in the days that follow and in the aftermath, I believe it is there, and we have to be intentional about finding it.
Are you all intentional about helping people in St. Louis?
Yeah, we do a segment that is on our air called Surprise Squad, and we have a lot of people that email in and say, hey, my 85-year-old bus driver has been doing this route for the last 40 years, and he does it because he loves the kids, and he's helping, and we'd like to surprise him with this or with that. Or we just had a veteran that we did a surprise squad for, and he wanted more than anything, I believe it was a flagpole put up in his front yard, and he loved seeing that flag every single morning. And I can't do what Extreme Home Makeover used to do on the network and rebuild an entire house, but we can do little things that help people in our community. And I also think with our platform, we are connectors, right? We are able to connect people to solutions. I think about just this week, we had a woman that was living off West Florissant, not far from Calvary Cemetery, and she's been living in her home for many, many years, and the house next door to her is abandoned, and it's been a nuisance for over a decade. But in the last few months, the house has actually been leaning, and she's been worried that the house was going to fall over into her living room. And my reporter told me she was actually sleeping in her car on the street, so concerned about this. Russell Kinsall, my reporter, made a couple of phone calls, and the next thing you know, there's a wrecking crew over there taking this house down. And I don't think it's because the city was waiting for a call from the media to make that happen, but sometimes we do have the opportunity to shine a light on problems and get things expedited. And I feel like that's what our platform can do and can do well. And so I'm happy to report that house has been taken down and that
That's
threat is
wonderful.
gone. Right. It's one person helped. And I think about that. I can't solve all of St. Louis's problems in one afternoon on the 6 o'clock newscast, but can we reach out and help one person? And if we can, I think it's worth doing.
Oh, I think it's really worth doing.
I do
You
too.
can make a
And
difference.
It is. And, it's impossible to leave your job feeling bad about that. I think about that as a reporter. And there are days where I miss being a reporter because I always liked when we were able to provide a solution for someone. And I see it every day. And I'm proud of our crew when we're able to do that because I don't think they realize the impact they have on that one person. The next day, that reporter, Russell, is moving on to the next story. But that woman will always remember what he did for her.
Well, if her house had fallen down,
Oh, yeah.
the impact she may not have had insurance. It might have been just a disaster for her.
You don't know. Right. Exactly.
Made a huge difference in her life. And there could have been there could have been bad people living in that house. You never know.
Yeah, and we know that, right? And that's a problem that we have in the city is that we do have a lot of derelict buildings and we've got a lot of vacancy. And how do we tackle that blight? And that's an ongoing issue that we look at, and there's just not enough money in the city coffers to take care of all of it at once. And so, we look at stories and we say, what is the comprehensive plan here? What is the strategy at City Hall to tackle this enormous problem? And it's not unique to St. Louis. It is in some ways as an industrial Rust Belt city, the Detroits of the world, the Baltimores of the world, the Pittsburghs, the St. Louis's. We have some commonalities between us that are unlike other markets. We're not the sunny Sun Belt Phoenix where everything is brand new and, they're building homes out on the desert floor. We are facing a situation in this region that is going to require some creative solutions. And how we get there, look, I don't have all the answers. I won't pretend to, but that's what our job is to ask the difference makers and the solution bringers, like, how do we fix these problems?
Well, I think you're doing a great job.
I appreciate that. Well, we're trying.
I thank you for coming on our show today. It's
Thank
been
you so much.
delightful.
Thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed it and happy to come back anytime.
Well, great. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Karen.
You have a great day.